What up, YouTube? I'm about to do an ASR6 Advanced Sim Racing Legacy Chassis review. I've got about, I'd say, 5 weeks, close to 150 hours in this chassis. I've been racing non-stop, and it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of kit, but it is not without its flaws like anything else. And because I paid my own money for this, I don't owe anyone a single thing, so I can give you the straight goods. No cap, real talk. In this video, I'm going to give you a general feature breakdown of the ASR6 Legacy, why I chose it over the ASR4 flat face or the ASR6 Pro, and the things that I like and dislike about the rig. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. So for those of you that don't know anything about the AR6 Legacy, it's made by Advanced Sim Racing, a Canadian company that's made big strides in the market of sim racing over the past 6 years. They design their own aluminum extrusion, somewhat in-house, as they've created Nova Extrusion, a subdivision of Advanced Sim Racing. The ASR6 Legacy is the second iteration of the original ASR6, which is made from 160 profile or 6-inch extrusion. It's one of their more high-end sim rig offerings, fully capable of accepting any power wheelbase or motion setup you can throw on it. And price-wise, it comes in about $11.99 Canadian plus tax. Okay, now let's get into the features of the ASR6 Legacy. The ASR6 features a revised Gen 2 wheel deck, as well as a simplified setup for mounting the uprights. Open-faced aluminum extrusion for complete flexibility when mounting accessories and peripherals. Aluminum silver powder coat for a true motorsports-inspired look. A steel pedal tray that comes pre-drilled to accept many of the top brands' pedals. Authentic GT-style seating position. An assortment of different ready-to-mount wheelbase mounting plates. And a hassle-free lifetime warranty. The ASR6 Legacy is offered in alloy gray or matte black currently, which wasn't available when I ordered about a month ago. I'm just going to quickly go into why I chose the ASR6 Legacy over some of the other offerings offered by Advanced Sim Racing. On the ASR website, you can get the ASR4 flat face chassis for about $20 less than the ASR6 Legacy. I went back and forth between these two chassis for a couple weeks. I ended up deciding on the ASR6 for a few reasons. The first being the color. I just really liked the gray. I thought that all the rigs I see are black, and I thought the gray was just a little bit different. It didn't cost any extra money. Fashion over function, I know, but the other reasons are mainly for function. First being the flat face extrusion just wasn't as flexible for me, and that's why I wanted the regular extrusion. The 160 profile aluminum extrusion is also more future-proof, and it adds some extra height, and that also brings me to the last reason, which was the stilts, which offered even more height and more rigidity and sturdiness, which kind of ended up being a moot point, but I will get to that later on in the review. The only other Advanced Sim Racing rig that I debated was the ASR Pro. I did like the Pro wheel deck and the pedal deck, but I just couldn't justify the extra double the price just for the hidden wire capabilities. I originally was really debating buying the Pro wheel deck along with the ASR6 Legacy, but I ended up spending too much on my seat and I blew all my budget, so I just had to get the regular Gen 2 wheel deck. Not to mention, I just wasn't sold on the flat face extrusion, and I kind of felt like it was just a gimmick, honestly. Okay, now that we've gone over the features, I'm going to get to the pros and the cons, starting with the pros. Okay, the first pro is kind of ironic, seeing how it's also listed in the cons list, but I'm just going to be honest, this chassis looks great. So I'm going to put the finish, the coating, the powder coat, the gray powder coat just looks phenomenal. Okay, the next pro for the ASR6 Legacy is going to be that it's completely rigid and sturdy. Even with my 27 Newton meter Invicta wheelbase, there's just no flex in this chassis, which is awesome. The next pro, at least for me anyway, is going to be that it's made from high quality aluminum extrusion made in Canada. As a Canadian, this was a very nice selling feature knowing that the aluminum is sourced locally, and ASR also designs their own extrusion, which is pretty cool. Okay, the next pro is that it came with plenty of extra hardware for future upgrades. Since the Advanced Sim Racing extrusion is unique to ASR, it's nice that they include plenty of extra nuts and M8 bolts to mount any add-ons you may be adding on in the future. The next pro of the ASR6 Legacy is definitely that it was well packaged. It came in custom ASR boxes. I only found like the tiniest bit of damage on the largest extrusion right on the edge. Originally I thought I was missing the flathead bolts that attach the brackets to the wheel deck, but they were just included in the plastic plug bag for the plastic covers. And now I'm going to get to the cons on the ASR6 Legacy. Okay, my first gripe of the ASR6 Legacy is going to be the Gen 2 wheel deck. The side brackets are machined for fashion being more important over function. This affects how much forward adjustment is available. Instead of making them square with a couple extra inches of adjustment, they're cut on an angle to be not visible for the driver. If the brackets were square, the wheel deck could be mounted flush with the uprights. I did ask ASR if they could machine me a custom set and sell them to me or even offer them for sale, and they told me they can't, which is understandable because it would make less people have to buy the Pro wheel deck. The fix for this is either to buy the Pro wheel deck off of ASR or get custom made brackets elsewhere and try and get them powder coated to match. Okay, the second con for the ASR6 Legacy is going to be applicable to every product from ASR, unfortunately, and that is a powder coat versus anodized finish. Although the powder coat looks great, there's some chunks and bumps of powder coat and trash in the finish. This isn't the end of the world. You just have to pick and choose where the imperfections are going to be. So I put them on the back side of my rig and on the underside of the rig if I could. Out of the two processes, anodizing is the more expensive option as well as the far superior one because it doesn't add any thickness while strengthening the outer layer of the aluminum. Hence why all guns are anodized and not powder coated, although anodizing tends to be less consistent on the color and be way harder to do on larger objects. The grooves on the extrusion are hard to coat with a spray and prone to buildup of material in those areas. This didn't affect anything on the ASR6 chassis during assembly, but it did affect the assembly on the screen stand and how it performs. The micro adjustment base amounts kept sliding slightly when I tightened them down due to the buildup of this powder coat in the groove, more or so on the right side than the left specifically. No matter how hard I tried to get it to stay in place, the base amount kept sliding a few millimeters to the left every time I tightened it down, affecting the gap between the screens. Although a powder coating is much stronger than a paint coating due to the fact that it's baked on, it's still a lot easier to scratch than an anodized coating. At about 3 weeks in, I noticed a little bit of wear and tear on the upright and on the bottom bar on the side of the rig that I get into. And on the upright where I had to move the wheel deck, you can also see some scratches. I was being so careful not to scratch anything. So it's like literally impossible to take pieces off and not have some scratches. Again, this is fashion over function because it doesn't affect anything. And of course, you're going to get some wear and tear on a rig if you're using as much as I have. Because of the added thickness from a powder coat finish, if you try and mount something and then you decide to move it, the powder coat in that area will now be damaged, almost cracked and crushed. Now this really wouldn't be a big deal if you just knew exactly where you needed to mount something and there was no questions, but that brings me to the next con, and that is the instructions. They were really easy to follow, but they don't offer any input on adjustability of certain areas, example, the screen stand and the screen stand height. And obviously, every aluminum profile rig can be adjusted and fine-tuned, but the instructions say to measure 5 inches from the top of the upright and mount the crossbar plates, not to mount them at a specific height based off of the chassis that you chose. If the screen stand is adjustable, it'd be nice to have an asterisk in this section mentioning that it can be mounted at a different height, and also even a section telling you what height to mount it at for what chassis you have. And I get it's impossible to tell what size screen the end user is going to be using, but they could have at least done a little section for 32s and 27s, because I have a hard time believing ASR isn't aware of this already, seeing how they build prefab rigs on the daily basis. Paired with the ASR6 Legacy, the ASR triple screen stand is too low with 32-inch screens mounted to clear the uprights. That is, unless you have the stilt legs completely set on the lowest position. Again, Advanced Sim Racing should know this, and since they build complete rigs every day, this is a major oversight on the instructions. This added at least an hour of extra time onto my chassis build, if not 2. Not to mention, the only remedy for this is literally disassembling the entire screen stand, removing the screens down to the crossbar, and then moving the brackets up, revealing the powder coat damage underneath. That, or lowering the adjustable legs down to the lowest position, which completely defeats the purpose of even having them in the first place. Even just adding an asterisk at the top of the screen stand instructions saying to put the chassis together first and then measure the uprights, with a little screen chart of common size screens and the corresponding offset from the top of the upright on the screen stand you need to use. I'm going to go in on a limb here and just assume that this probably only affects people who have a 160 profile chassis, but it goes the other way too. If you have an 80 profile chassis, your screens might be way too high. And again, I wouldn't consider this to be as big a deal as I do, except for the fact that ASR builds rigs. They build them, custom rigs. They know this. They should just put it in the info. And to wrap up the instructions con, I kind of wish they at least included some paper instructions, or at least a little piece of paper with a scan code to take you to the instructions online rather than making you having to search for them. Really just a minute detail, but I did find myself having to go to the ASR website at least 2 or 3 times, searching for the ASR6 chassis and then scrolling down and then clicking on the instructions instead of just having them on paper, sitting on my floor. And that brings me to the next con of the ASR6 Legacy. I already touched upon this once, and that is the legs. The way the ASR6 Legacy uprights mount to the bottom extrusion is by a plate on the bottom and a 45-degree plate mounted on the top of the bottom extrusion. The bottom plate makes it so the chassis can't sit flush on the floor without mounting some sort of leg. The bottom mounted plates where the stilt legs attach aren't a necessity, although they do add width, and in turn that adds rigidity. The stilt legs are really long, I'm assuming because some people want to add extra height, and this also gives you the ability to level on a really uneven surface. But with the screen stand height specified in the instructions, the bolts on the legs stick up about 3 inches and create a bit of a tripping hazard. It's an easy fix with an angle grinder, which is a common theme here. I'm just wondering why include such long legs when the setup, as instructed by the manufacturer to build it, will not work as instructed. The feet do allow for a lot of height adjustment, but the screen stand will need to be made higher to accommodate any extra height you add. And this isn't the end of the world by any means, but this is something the instructions could have easily included. Something like mount the horizontal brackets on the screen stand at said height if you're using the ASR6, and said height if you're using the ASR4. I assembled the screen stand first, then I realized the issue only after I had already assembled the chassis. At this point, the only fix was to remove all 3 screens, remove the horizontal support bar, and then move the mounting plates up, leaving damaged powder coat visible where the brackets used to be mounted. Or lowering the stilt legs all the way to their lowest setting, which defeats the point of even having them in the first place. I will admit they do add some sturdiness because of the wider footprint, but I wasted a lot of time doing the directions as I was directed. Okay, now I'm going to get to the next con, and that is the steel pedal plate. It is incredibly heavy, which really doesn't matter. My issue is the fact that it lacks forward adjustability because of the mounting tabs being so wide, they contact the end plate. It can be remedied by buying the aluminum plate or the pro pedal plate if they offer it, or by taking a cutoff wheel to the steel pedal plate mounting tabs. You could even re-drill the holes and just move the pedals back, but they'd be hanging off the end of the pedal tray. In my case, I could also buy a seat slider or bigger seat brackets and move the seat back a little bit because my seat is actually maxed out currently with the low brackets. I understand there's going to be some tweaking on every sim rig, so this really isn't a big deal. I'm just pointing out every little thing that I noticed when I built this rig. I'm not trying to shade ASR in any way, shape, or form. They're an amazing company. So I noticed in the sim racing community, there's a lot of paid shills. You'll never find me shilling. You'll never find me shilling. I'm always going to tell the truth. And that's going to bring me to the last con that I have for the ASR6 Legacy Chassis, and that is the plastic end covers. More so how they're attached. The plates themselves are fine. In fact, they're actually really nice. They have ASR branding on them. My issue is with the mounting method. After about 3 weeks of heavy use, the end cap by my feet where I get into the rig falls off constantly. The plugs get worn out after the plate gets hit a bunch of times, and if you have to remove a plate, like I did, I had to remove the top plates on the uprights because I had the wheel deck in the wrong slots. You're going to have to wreck those little plugs. They just aren't going to be good anymore after you pull them out. Eventually, I'm going to buy some button head screws, and I'm going to tap all of the screw holes where those plates mount and use the button head screws instead. I honestly feel like this would be a nice upgrade that ASR could even offer when you buy the rig, because they also kind of vibrate when there's vibrations in the rig. Okay, overall, I give the ASR6 Legacy from Advanced Sim Racing an 8 out of 10. My biggest gripes being the lack of adjustment in the wheelbase. They could have just really nailed it if they had just added a square bracket there instead of that angled one. It looks cool. 10 times out of 10, I would just take the extra adjustment over not being able to see that bracket. So that is my biggest gripe. Just a couple side notes. If you're going to buy from ASR, make sure you know that this could take 3 weeks for your chassis to even ship. Mine took 3 weeks before it was dispatched. No big deal. I think they're made to order. But if you're like in a rush, then make sure you order that chassis way ahead of time. I was also looking for individual T-nuts and M8 bolts, and they just do not have a hardware section on their website, which I found kind of weird. And I was a little bit stressed whether I was going to have seat mounting hardware because Advanced Sim Racing website does not say that it's included, but I was given a set of seat mounting hardware in my hardware bag. Okay, that basically wraps up my ASR6 Legacy video. I just want to stress the fact that I am not a paid shill and I have zero to do with Advanced Sim Racing. They didn't give me any deals on this chassis. I paid full price for it. Therefore, the opinions expressed in this video are 100% mine because I have zero people to answer to. If you or someone you know is looking for a high quality aluminum extrusion rig, I would not hesitate to go to Advanced Sim Racing again. If I could change one thing on my rig currently, it would be that I would get extended seat brackets or a seat slider, because that could have alleviated a couple of the problems that I ran into on this build. But in my opinion, a sim rig is probably never done, so stay tuned for any upgrades that I may be doing along the way. If you made it this far into the video and you like the content, please consider giving me a like and subscribe because it really helps my channel. Until next time, I'm Bosco Too Fast. See you on the grid. Peace.